Hello. So recently I was messing around in Celeste and I thought to myself, wow, jumping around is fun. What if we didn't jump? But first, let's set the rules for this challenge. Every time we press the jump button, it counts as a jump. That's about it. So we name our character and we get going. Oh, and this is what I like to call the tutorial syndrome. Tutorial levels are often meant to be played in one single way, and in Celeste we don't have access to the dash here, which leaves us with walking, I guess? So when we see a gap like this, we literally don't have any other options than jumping, which happens 4 times in the prologue. But then we unlock the dash, and that's when this challenge starts making sense. So with our newly acquired dash, we move to chapter 1. The beginning of chapter 1 is just a few dashes until we reach the first checkpoint. Here we climb as high as possible on this wall and fall towards the crystal. And then we have the first real obstacle of this challenge. Normally you're supposed to jump to this crystal, but obviously we don't want that. And if we let ourselves fall from this wall, we're missing a tiny bit more distance to reach the crystal. But thankfully there's a solution. When you hold the jump button, your character stays a bit longer in the air during some animations, like falling from a wall for example, which allows us to reach the crystal. But wait a second, holding jump would require pressing jump in the first place, right? Well, we already pressed the jump button back in the prologue, so if I just keep holding the jump button all the way to this point, then we don't have to jump again. Now, you could think that this means we're going to hold the jump button for the entire game, but actually that's not quite the case, and this next room is a good example of that. If you hold the jump button while climbing on a falling platform, the platform will start falling before you finish landing on it. So we'll have to release the jump button here. And this room is impossible. The gap is way too big to cross without jumping, and there's nowhere to get your dash back. So unfortunately, this will have to be the first jump of chapter 1. We then reach this room, and it's time to introduce a trick we're going to use a lot throughout this challenge, which I like to call the double dash. When you use a dash, if your character is still on the ground at the end of the dash, you get your dash back, so you can dash again in mid-air. You just need a platform big enough for that. But then we reach this mechanism, and this challenge made me hate those mechanisms. Simply dashing doesn't quite cover enough distance to cross the gap, and the room above here doesn't look very promising, so unfortunately that will be our second jump. Then we double dash to the wall and jump once more to grab this crystal, and then we can dash through the crystal mid-air to reach this small platform. Now here the platform is too small to do a regular double dash because we would already be outside of the platform after a forward dash. But if we do a diagonal dash instead, we travel a bit less horizontal distance, so the platform is just long enough to get our dash back and move on to the next room, where we can use the vertical momentum of this mechanism to reach the platform without jumping. We then double dash again, and here I tried to grab this tiny edge to fall to the platform, but unfortunately we can't reach the platform this way, so we'll have to jump again. And here mechanism hell is back. Normally we would have to jump 2 times, once on the first mechanism and once on the second one. However, just like we did a few rooms prior, we can use the vertical momentum from that mechanism to reach the wall and pass this room with only 1 jump. And that's the end of chapter 1, which took 5 jumps in total. This might seem like a lot for the first chapter, but as the chapters get harder, we will have a lot more things to play with, which means new way of avoiding jumps. Anyway, let's move to chapter 2, and we quickly reach this room, which at first glance doesn't look very promising as a double dash can't reach the first crystal. And that's where we start doing something we'll also use a lot in this run, screen transitions. If we go back to the previous room, we can use the screen transition to dash just under the spikes and grab both crystals without having to jump. Though in the next room, that little wall prevents us from doing that, and falling from this wall doesn't work, so unfortunately we'll have to jump once to get past. After that... oh, I guess that's it? On a more serious note, the rest of this chapter was filled with dream blocks, so not jumping was rather trivial, which makes chapter 2 doable with only one jump. Pretty cool. Now let's move to chapter 3, and that's where the challenge starts getting interesting because we have a lot more things to play with. We run through the first few rooms and reach this part where we will need to do a bunch of double dashing on those platforms. A lot of double dashing on platforms. We then reach this room, which was a bit tricky. This platform is just long enough for a diagonal double dash, and here we have to grab the very last pixel of these two walls to barely cross the gap. And then we have to be careful here, because we will use that screen transition to grab this wall, and with a precise dash, we can grab the wall above to save a jump. Then we have to get over there, but a simple dash would make us bump on the wall, so we'll have to use a crouch dash instead to avoid that. And unfortunately here we can't climb those walls without jumping, so we'll have to do an extended hyperdash, which will be the first jump of this chapter. After that we double dash to the wall and slow fall to the crystal to barely grab it, and we finally get the key and move on to the first checkpoint. Now here we have to clear 3 different parts of the hotel, and the order in which we complete them slightly changes the rooms, so after a bit of testing I figured the best route would be bottom first, then right, and top for last. So first, let's go down. Yeah, there wasn't anything interesting here. Then we go right, which is just a bit of double dashing until we reach this room. A double dash here wouldn't quite reach this platform, so at first I thought it was impossible, but then when I was routing chapter 4 I realized something. Wait... huh. And now it's time to tackle the top room, which was the hardest one of the 3. Here we have those little blobs blocking the way, which in a normal playthrough would just require a simple jump. But we don't do that in here, so instead we have to line up with this pixel to dash to the wall, and with the right timing we can barely get past just before the dust bunny hits us. Yeah, those are called bunnies. I don't know, just have a bit of imagination. And the next room was quite the puzzle. We will need to double dash to the wall, fall to the crystal, and here we do some fancy shenanigans so we can line up with the crystal here. And now we can use 2 dashes to grab the next crystal and barely land on the ground. And press the button. Okay, this checkpoint was a bit tedious, but we managed to get past without having to jump. Let's hope the next part is a bit easier. Damn it. So here we have the absolute bane of this challenge. Long vertical distances with obstacles on the way. And at first I thought it would take 3 jumps, but after a bit more trying it turns out you can get past in just 2 jumps. You just need to wall boost on this wall and neutral jump over this bunny, allowing you to run out of stamina. But I'm not the type to give up, so how can we consume less stamina when climbing walls? Well, the most common way to save stamina while climbing is neutral jumps. Yeah, that won't do. But there's actually another obscure way of saving stamina, which I don't know the name of, so I'm just going to call it grab reset. By quickly releasing and pressing grab with the right timing, you can climb walls using a bit less stamina. And by doing that on this wall, we have just enough stamina to get past with only 2 jumps. And we quickly reach the next obstacle. First we double dash to the top platform, but now we have a problem. We can't double dash on this platform because of the dust, and the crystal is too far away to reach with a simple dash. So how can we get to the crystal? Never mind, we don't need the crystal. We then have to jump once to grab that little platform above and reach the next room. Yeah, don't worry, I'm going to explain what just happened in a moment. In this next room, we will have to jump once to grab that crystal, but we can avoid doing it on the second crystal by just falling to it instead and dashing through it after it respawns. Okay, now it's time to explain what happened a few seconds ago. There's two types of dashes in the game, the regular dash that we use most of the time, and the crouch dash, which has the particularity of lowering your hitbox, making it only 4 pixels tall. Also, the hitbox of dust and spinners is smaller than it looks, and it turns out that there's a gap of exactly 4 pixels between spinners and bunnies. So by crouch dashing in between two bunnies, we can get past without having to jump. Then in the next room we can dash above those two groups of bunnies, and unfortunately we will have to jump once to grab this wall and once more to reach the crystals. And after bonking Oshiro a few times, that's the end of chapter 3, which took 7 jumps to complete. Alright, let's move to chapter 4. Yeah, thanks for the tip. The first obstacle of this chapter is this bubble, where we have to use screen transitions to barely reach it. And then it's the return of wind currents. I hate wind currents. We do a bunch of double dashes on these platforms and already reached the first jump of this chapter. We can double dash to this wall, but then we'll have to jump if we want to cross the gap. The coins are not really an issue, and here we have to be careful because this room is coming up next. Yeah, it's another one of those big vertical rooms. We have to climb this huge wall without any way of getting our dash back. So to get enough hate, we'll have to use the screen transition and one wall boost, and then bully the hell out of the grab key to save stamina. Nice. Then we need to reach that platform over there, so we'll use the screen transition again to grab that wall from under, and unfortunately falling to this platform doesn't work, so we'll have to jump again. Now here I wanted to get past with only one jump, but no matter how hard I tried, I was missing just a bit of hate to reach the last crystal. But then I had another idea. If we grab that platform and let it go, we can dash to where the platform was. And now we can do one little jump to grab the wall, wait for the platform to respawn, and we can take the platform and use our dashes to grab the crystals, allowing us to get past with only one jump. And the next obstacle is this bubble all the way over there, which is way too far to even dream of getting it without jumping, so we'll do an extended hyperdash. This part is also looking pretty bad, but we can actually dash diagonally to grab the wall and then fall to the bubble. And then they really want us to jump, huh? But it's not that bad. We can demo dash under that spike to grab the wall without having to jump. The wind current prevents us from falling to the next bubble though, so we'll have to jump. Then we jump another time to reach this cloud and barely pass this gap with a precise extended hyperdash. Then we jump off this wall, and here it looks like the bubble is a bit too high to reach without jumping. But it turns out that if you climb on the platform and drop at the very peak, you can barely reach the bubble. And this room was quite the puzzle. With a few double dashes we can reach that block, but then we have two problems. If we hold a jump, we can't reach that wall because we take too long to land on the falling block. However, if we release jump, we fall too fast to reach the bubble above. So how can we bypass this problem? Yup, we can just wait for the block to respawn and use it to regain our dash, allowing us to reach the bubble. In this room we have to double dash and jump twice to get past this wall, and then we use the fancy grab reset again to reach the top without running out of stamina. Then we have to jump one final time to grab this bubble. Yes, that's the last jump of this chapter. The rest of the chapter is just a bit of double dashing, falling to this bubble, and that's it. Wow, this chapter was annoying, with a total of 12 jumps. Thankfully, the next chapter isn't as bad. No, I'm not being sarcastic this time, it's really not that bad. We start the chapter by grabbing a few bubbles and getting a key to open a door, and we take a shortcut to the first real room of this chapter. Here we have those nasty walls preventing us from progressing, so we'll have to jump here, but we can save a jump by dashing under that wall and grabbing it. Although then we'd still need 2 more jumps. Then we drop the big curtain and talk to Madeline. We do a bit more double dashing, and this next room was pretty hard. We have to find a way to slide under the platform without bonking on the ceiling or on the returning platform. So we're going to dash towards this wall to position the platform correctly and dash under it to grab the wall as it goes and get past the room. Then we bonk on a few monsters and reach the next checkpoint, where we dash to the first few bubbles, jump once to grab this one, and move on to the labyrinth. Normally here you're supposed to get 3 keys to open those doors for the bubble, but this mechanism prevented me from getting all 3 keys without jumping, so if we have to jump, we'll just do it here instead. In the next 2 rooms we use those monsters to climb up, and we find Theo in a crystal. Now the rest of this chapter was pretty straightforward, but before moving to chapter 6, we have to do something of utmost importance. I hate those monsters. Alright, time for chapter 6, and this is one of the most interesting chapters in this challenge. The first real room is this one, where we need to be precise with our double dash and the feather movement to barely grab the edge of this wall. Then we land on a tiny bridge and encounter another mechanism issue. In this room we can barely cross the gap by grabbing this Kevin very close to the spinners and dashing at the last moment with the momentum gained. And oh lord, this room was hard. We need to grab this crystal and reach the other mechanism, but this little wall blocks the way, so we'll have to hit that Kevin with a dash, land on top to get our dash back, very quickly fall back to the edge just under the wall, releasing grab at the right moment, and dashing to reach the crystal. The next few rooms are rather easy, and we reach the next checkpoint, where we speak a bit to Granny. Then we double dash above those spinners, and oh, already another checkpoint. Now it's time to chase Madeline, and some of those rooms were a nightmare. The first obstacle was this room. In order to get past this wall, we have to climb to the very top and fall to the other side. But that spike makes things particularly complicated. But after a lot of trying, it turns out to be possible. Then a bit later, we have to dash around those spinners, and in the very next room we have to do a very precise double dash to avoid those spinners. Then we reach this part. I really thought it was impossible, but after enough brute forcing, it turns out that with perfect positioning and timing, a double demo dash can barely avoid the laser and cross the gap. And then we have another huge obstacle. We have to go above the spinners to reach Madeline, but unfortunately the platform boost isn't nearly enough to get over it without jumping, so we might have to jump. Wait, aren't those spinners? I love this trick. Unfortunately, in the next room we will really have to jump, because this time we don't have spinners to go through, which is only the second jump of this chapter, and also the last one, because then we use the screen transition to grab that feather, and the chapter is done. 2 jumps only, that's pretty nice. But what's coming up ahead isn't very nice. Although chapter 7 is going to be difficult, there is one cool thing about it, which is that we now have access to 2 air dashes, so the double dash trick becomes a triple dash now, which we already used in the first room. And now, although we're only in the second room of this chapter, it's already getting difficult. I tried grabbing that crystal with a dash, but was lacking a bit of vertical range to grab it, so instead I had to double dash and grab that wall from under, and then wait for the crystal to respawn to grab it mid-dash. The next few rooms were just a bit of triple dashing and springs, and we moved to the first checkpoint. Okay, we're gonna have a problem. So dashing from that mechanism doesn't cover enough distance, and dashing twice from this wall also doesn't cover enough distance. And there's not much else to play with in this room, so after desperately trying to attempt very stupid things for 30 minutes, I ended up having to jump. We then take a few springs and meet the next obstacle, this wall. I haven't found a way to go to the left path without jumping, and falling from this wall doesn't cover enough distance to grab the other wall. So I thought it was impossible, but after a lot of research and delving into the abyss of obscure Celeste tech, I found something interesting. This Reddit post mentions that when you grab a wall, you can regain your dash 1 pixel before touching the ground. And that reminded me of ultra dashes. The way I thought ultra dashes worked is that when you dash diagonally down, you get a speed bonus until you touch the ground. That is not how it works, but I thought it did. So I tried to dash diagonally down on this wall, regain my dash without touching the ground, and I thought it would give me a movement speed bonus. And it worked. But the problem is, that's not how ultra dashes work. You seemingly get the speed bonus after touching the ground. So I have no idea why this worked, but I will gladly take it. In the next room though, no fancy tricks will be able to save us from jumping this time. Then we grab some coins and move to the next room. Seriously? And this room was pretty hard. First, we use the recoil from the platform to grab this wall, and then, with 2 precise diagonal dashes, we can barely avoid the spikes and move on to the next rooms. Then we bounce on some springs again, and finally reach the next checkpoint. Oh hey, a bunch of dream blocks. And we already reached the next checkpoint. Now it's Dust Bunny time again, and usually I hate those, but this time it wasn't that bad. It was just a matter of double and triple dashing around until we reached the next checkpoint. After that, reaching this bubble is a bit tough, but with optimal movement it's possible, and the next bubble is just triple dashing again. And now it's time for my favorite part of the run. At first glance, this room seems rather hopeless. We have a bunch of spiky, falling platforms blocking the way, and the crystal is definitely too far to reach without jumping. So how are we gonna do this? Okay, let me explain. By letting the platform destroy itself, we can land on it while it's still reconstructing, because the spikes only appear after it's been fully rebuilt. And after that, we move on to the next checkpoint, where another fancy trick awaits us. First, we dash through this wall and meet our number 1 enemy again, mechanisms. There's no way we can cross that gap without jumping, and even if we could, we would have a problem after reaching the wall anyway. Then we dash on this platform and use its momentum to reach the wall. In the next room, after getting to this wall, we wait for the crystal to respawn to triple dash to the platform, and by being careful to keep the mechanisms still, we can double dash to grab the platform. Then we have to slide under that moving platform to grab it, and I don't know what those fancy light bulbs up there are supposed to do, but we can just dash to the next room and it's gonna be fancy trick time. We encounter the first problem here, where we'll have to grab the edge of that platform and jump to this wall, and then we can reach the other platform with a dash. But now, that's where it gets complicated. Here we have 2 big platforms coming down when we dash, but the first issue is that they're just a tiny bit too high to be able to grab them with a dash. But thankfully there's a bit of a wall right under it, so we can use a little trick. At the end of the climbing animation, our character hops a bit higher than the height of the block, so if we dash while at the peak of that little hop, we can barely grab the platform without jumping, allowing us to go all the way up there. However, it's not looking very good here. We only have 1 dash left, we're running out of stamina, and dashing would move the platforms down, preventing us from landing on top of this one and getting our dashes back. So I had to find a workaround. Yup. By positioning on the correct pixel and dashing right, we can land on top of the platform while it's falling down and then quickly dash to that wall. But now we have another problem. We're on this wall without any dashes left, and the bubble is still out of reach. So unfortunately, it looks like all of our efforts went to waste. Just kidding, did you really think I would go through all this hassle of finding a way to get up here if it wasn't possible to reach the bubble afterwards? Yeah, that's literally what I did, I forgot there was a berry room here. Anyway, after this happy accidental discovery, we zoom to the summit of the mountain, and that's where the game really starts to crush our hopes. So far we've only jumped 5 times in chapter 7. Let's see how many more it will take for the summit. We climbed that big wall and already reached our first issue. The wind current prevents us from double dashing to this wall, and trying to grab the side doesn't work either, so we'll have to do a wall boost here to reach the wooden platform. Then 2 dashes to go over those spikes, carefully bounce on top of those springs to get as much height as possible, and that spring looks a bit annoying, but we can actually activate it by dashing under. Then we have our next big obstacle. First, reaching that stone platform looks pretty hard, but with a good triple dash we can reach it. Now the real problem is here. Because of the wind current, a double dash wouldn't reach this wall, and unfortunately falling from that wall is just a few pixels away from reaching the crystal, so we'll have to jump once on the platform and wall bounce to reach the crystal. Then we double dash to the cloud, and this flag was interesting. First, we avoid those spinners by doing an up dash, and after the cloud, we take this crystal and rest on top, waiting for the crystal to respawn, and with the right timing, dash through it while it respawns to reset our dash. But then we have a pretty big gap, which unfortunately can't be crossed without jumping. Unless... I was pretty happy after doing that, but then the game decided we've had enough fun, and hits us with the 2 nastiest flags in the chapter. Here we can't even reach that block with 2 dashes, so we'll have to jump just to reach it, and then we're out of dashes, so we'll have to jump again to reach the next flag. Then we triple dash to the spring, and the game hits us with a ton of spiky walls, forcing us to jump 4 times to reach the next flag. Now it calmed down a bit though, we just dash over those spinners and I light it doesn't calm down. Here we have to travel a big vertical distance, which we hate in this challenge. So we'll have to do a double dash up into a wall boost and then jump to this crystal. And we can just dash up to reach the next crystal. And holy, this was hard. Here we have to double dash above those spinners, so we have 1 dash left to reach the crystal. And I'm probably doing something very wrong, but with this setup, I'm pretty sure the timing is frame perfect. And after 30 minutes of dying over and over again, I finally got past the spinners. And here we have to... Anyway. After more trying, we reach that part again where we have to dash under to grab the wall. Then we have 1 little jump here to reach flag 9, and that's an interesting flag. With a precise triple dash we can barely reach that crystal and grab the wall without dying, and when the crystal respawns we just take it to reach the next flag. Now that little cloud is unfortunately barely not strong enough to reach the top with 2 dashes, so we'll have to jump. And oh no, I hate this. A double dash unfortunately doesn't cover enough vertical distance to get past, and anything I've tried didn't work, so we'll have to jump once to the wall and once more to the crystal. And for the rest we can just dash through the crystals as they respawn. Then we take that little cloud and grab reset a bit to save some stamina. And unfortunately those spinners are just a tiny bit too high to get past with an up dash, so that's another jump. And we have the same issue here, where we're going to have to wall boost to barely grab this crystal. And here we have a bit of a problem. Yeah, you know what's happening. Easy. And we dash our way to the very last obstacle of this challenge. Dang, that crystal's really high. But that's not gonna stop us. By triple dashing on the right pixel, we can barely reach the crystal, dash through it as it respawns, shboing on that spring, and nope, falling doesn't work. So we have to jump to that crystal, and now we just need to do one more final dash as the crystal respawns trick, and that's it. We grab flag 1 and reach the summit of the mountain. So let's recap. In total, beating Celeste took us 59 jumps, 4 jumps in the prologue, 5 jumps in chapter 1, 1 jump in chapter 2, 7 jumps in chapter 3, 12 jumps in chapter 4, 5 jumps in chapter 5, 2 jumps in chapter 6, and 23 jumps in chapter 7, with 18 of them being in the summit. That's it for this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check the pinned comment for any updates or clarifications, and thanks for watching, bye bye!